Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Marketing Water Cooler podcast. My name is Jeremy Francesi. Thanks for stopping by. As you know, on this show, we talk about marketing, communications, the changing landscape, and really try to add value for founders and marketers so that they can operate in the current landscape of how people buy things, acquire information, tap peer groups, and accelerate growth. Today, we're very excited to jump in with Nora Sudith. Really impressive background, everything from being integral in building out part of the ClickFunnels conversation with Russell, but really having a significant amount of success in driving $500 million in online sales and being able to align with how people buy products and services today and how we make that process really effective so they want to engage in your process. And then obviously with what you have going on today with audio podcasts and audio marketing, we'll dig into that as well. So Nora, thanks so much for jumping in. How are you? We got a Friday production whenever this goes live. So close of the week. How's the week been for you?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm really excited to be here. This is a perfect way to close out the week. Good conversation. It's always good.
I'm with you on that. As I take a drink, we've been back to back on meetings. No, I'm with you on that. And look, I was looking forward to getting together. I think if any of you have tuned in and plugged into the podcast, you understand that season 2 has been really focused on understanding really some core shifts that are taking place. We spend a lot of our time on the B2B side, but when we look at the numbers, there's more people at the table. Those people, when evaluating decisions, especially in a higher ticket environment, are doing more independent research. And I think a lot of companies are a little bit stuck on, do I start a podcast? Do I start a blog? What do I do right now? I understand they want to do more research, but they don't necessarily have a strategy and a process to go from A to B in a way that's effective, that captures in market behavior, but also sets up a long-term effective process, right? So let's start here, Nora. I'd love to give a little bit of background on you. You have a very interesting background from things that don't traditionally fall into the marketing world. I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself for those that have maybe not come across you or your story at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I took kind of that traditional path, right, to success. So, granted, my parents they didn't go to college. They were like, you're going to college. You're going to be the first one. Ended up with 3 degrees, starting with computer science, and did a couple of masters, engineering psychology and MBA, and did the whole corporate thing, right? So kind of started climbing that corporate ladder, really focused on I work with everybody from startups to Fortune 500 companies, just focusing on growth. And sometimes that was, big multi-million and multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. And sometimes it was, just massive growth in the sense that we needed to put some processes and systems that scaled right in place so that we didn't impact our brand equity and also just make sure our customers stayed happy, right? So had a lot of amazing clients in corporate, and unlike a lot of corporate retirees, let's say, I loved it. I mean, there was, what I didn't love was the meetings. I will admit to that. I think I am still the proud domain owner of fthemeeting.com. And that was definitely a purchase while I was in a meeting. I still own that one. And I think that was kind of what pushed me over from kind of climbing that corporate ladder into kind of jumping off the trajectory of a typical corporate, kind of executive into the entrepreneurship. I never really thought that was who I was. But then, ended up just kind of finding and following a passion, which is really serving and helping people with their market positioning and their messaging. No crazy, schemer and dreamer tactics. That's not really my thing. But really, started my marketing agency, grew it to multiple 6 figures in less than 9 months. At the time, I happened to be using WordPress to start, and then ClickFunnels was brand new. They were just babies at that point, and was using their product because it was faster. It was faster than, and granted, even with my tech background, it was still super fast to be able to get things up for clients. Russell found out what I was doing, got a Vox from him, and he said, hey, would you be willing to shut down your agency and come rebuild my certification program? And I was like, well, how do you say no to Russell Brunson, one of the best marketers on the planet, and just a super kind and amazing human being too. So, kind of thought I was going to go one way and then shut down the agency, and then started working with Russell, built a couple seven-figure programs for ClickFunnels. Since then, I've consulted on thousands of other marketing campaigns, and it's been a blast. Recently, co-founding Hello Audio, and I mean, it's an amazing trajectory. And through that whole path, being able to interact with so many different types of businesses, I think has been probably some of the secret sauce to being able to sell, being behind selling, $500 million of stuff.
Yeah, it's it's a pretty badass opportunity.
It's pretty
Like,
crazy.
well,
Yeah.
I gotta ask, like, Nora, when you got that email or like that outreach from him of like, hey, like that's like, I mean, let's be honest, like anybody that's listening that's built a business like that's a wild question to receive. Like, hey, if you shut that down and come build, like, you've spent time build. What was that? How did you justify that decision?
Well, it was Russell. So I think
Yeah.
there's that part, right? And I think it
Okay.
was partly the impact and the reach, right?
Yeah.
So while I had built a successful agency and I was having success with my clients, at some point I had to make a decision. Either I was going to scale that agency because I was at that point where I was either going to make it a big deal or I was going to maybe go teach others how to do it and then let them kind of scale their own
Right.
agencies. And to me, after having been in corporate and having been in management, I was like, you know what? I have 2 kids. That seems to be enough to manage sometimes, like on a
Right.
day to day. I'm like, when you're managing employees, I'm like, that feels like maybe all I really want to sign up for right now.
Totally.
And then just being able to be in the orbit as ClickFunnels was growing and just experiencing, I mean, crazy, crazy growth, crazy, really market defining phase of their trajectory, it was a no-brainer to say yes.
It well, it clearly played out, right? It clearly played out. You
Yes.
said something earlier that kind of caught me was that you felt you took a traditional route, but didn't you study like computer science and like human like things on that
Yeah,
side?
I
So for
did.
me, that's really interesting because I think a lot of the traditional marketing is they go to maybe business school or they go get a marketing degree, but you went the technology side and the
Mhm.
psychology behind how people interact with technology. Like I'm very curious on how that played out for you because if you clearly understand how to leverage technology to connect buyers to products and services. But for me, as somebody that like looks at that journey, like it feels like there has to be something to tie between the two because I mean, shit, it was just so effective. Like, how did that play out for you? You know?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the pivoting points were really me being, and this was at a time, this was back in the 90s, right? So like I'm gonna really date myself here, but there weren't many females going into computer science.
Right.
There wasn't. And so part of me, I think, was just enamored with the challenge. Like, oh, and I'll tell you a quick story because this is kind of funny. So I went to an all girls Catholic high school on the south side of Chicago, and I met with the principal at the time, and went into her office, and I really was trying to petition to get computer science classes for the girls. The boys' schools had them, all boys' schools had them, but I really wanted to learn how to do programming. Right, that was kind of the cool thing at the time. And I remember very clear, I was prepared. I had my notes, right? Like any good person just trying to persuade, like the sister, like, to help me put this in place. And she's like, well, we have keyboarding. That's all you need. And I think it was that conversation that I was like, oh, wait, really? This is
Right.
Oh yeah, watch me. Now watch me. So I remember I enrolled at community college. I think I started learning Fortran, like like all that. I mean, really crazy. But I did whatever I could because I think it was one of those things where you were kind of told, oh, that's not for you, or that's not for, things. So I think I took that as a challenge and went that route. The other thing that really interested me, even from when I was a kid, I started doing, programming when I was in 5th grade. I mean, it's crazy, but my mom and dad ended up buying me like this $3,000 computer at the time. They were so expensive and huge, right? And I
Right.
started doing that kind of cool stuff because I was interested in it. But it wasn't just the tech. So if you know a lot of technical people or folks that do have computer science backgrounds, they don't
Mhm.
always tend to be the most personable, right? They don't always
Sure.
tend to have the interaction or the communication skills that someone like in business school would have, or someone who's a sales executive would have, where they talk about those relationships. And for me, I was always fascinated on how to use technology as a bridge to connect with folks. And even
Right.
back in the 90s, granted, that wasn't, now you see how technology has exploded. And that's all. I mean, there's tons of technologies to connect with people. That's why people build technologies, is so that we are able to connect with each other in this kind of distributed world. And for me back then, I was so enamored with technology and connecting with other human beings in a way that made impact. It actually created something. It wasn't just transactional. That's where I got really excited. So yeah, went that path through. Went to University of Illinois in Champaign, Urbana,
Nice.
one of the top schools for computer science, and was probably one of 3 women in the class. But it was fascinating to me to see the gaps of, how it's like we're so focused on the tech, and you're like, yeah, but the tech is just a tool. The tech is a tool that will help us create amazing things in this world and in business. So yeah, it was, I guess, untraditional from that sense. Probably more, I know a lot of people like to, especially in the entrepreneurial world, like, you don't need college degrees. And I'm like, I've got 3 and I feel like they were super valuable. So.
Right. Well, that's where I think, so we work with a variety of organizations that have technical founders. And one thing we're really loud about is there's such a focus on amplification and not enough focus on communication.
Yes.
Making an average or a shitty message louder doesn't make it a more compelling or more effective offer.
True.
Right. And so I think we're in this really unique time in marketing, but communications at large, where creative being a variable, and what your podcast is, what the content is, how you deliver that value, especially if you are talking about a technology, right? Like there's a huge opportunity here where you can't just pay your way to play. You really have to be thoughtful. Right. We put out some recent stuff from the season 1, where it's like relevance is the key to everything in marketing. You can put out the most beautiful looking video, but if the message doesn't add any value to anybody, I saw a post today from Dave Gerhardt that's hard. Most people fail at the point of the offer. Everything is good, but you're just not giving them anything that's compelling. Right. Yep. So I'm curious from that standpoint, because so many technical founders, so many engineers, the gap is, how do I effectively take all the thoughts in my head and communicate it in a concise way that actually transfers the knowledge, right? Or creates an emotional connection, right? We're not talking about features. At what point in the journey did you shift from the technical background, the computer science, into, I can take my knowledge of how to use tools and technology and building products and help people buy and sell and really connect between those two agents? Like, was that something you knew at core? You're like, all right, Nora is a marketer at core. This has a strong technical background. Like, when did that become the journey?
It wasn't until I just started helping people for free because I was interested in it. So like, in corporate, you're doing your thing, maybe you're doing due diligence on a merger or an acquisition, or you're managing projects, or you're putting processes in place. And that's like, you're doing your thing, you're doing the job, what needs to be done. But where I found is, when my daughter and I were getting our black belts in Taekwondo, and granted, I was in my 30s at the time, right? We're doing it together, good funding. And kids are made of rubber and Red Bull. Adults are not. So learn that one the hard way. But, and just helping the Taekwondo school and just talking to them about their challenges and believing in their product, you want to help them get more people in the door, right? And you're having a great experience, your family's having a great experience. And so I started to really branch out and help more local businesses. And I was like, wow, this is actually really fun. And I know how I can take the tech is easy for me. And at that point, that was usually what was the biggest barrier. And they just thought that they weren't able to achieve more leads, more sales, more, hit their revenue goals, their expansion goals, because the tech was in their way. And the reality was that wasn't the only thing in their way. To your point, they didn't have the messaging down, right? They needed to understand their market positioning, and they needed to be able to clearly articulate the customer conversation. And that by having both of those two things combined, then you start. But it wasn't until I really started helping people for free where I was like, I would do this for free. This is actually really fun. And then, you gain corporate, you're like, all right, how am I going to make, just like other entrepreneurs, you're making, really good money in corporate. How am I going to actually transition and make a business out of this? But it was too difficult not to, because the passion was just there.
Of course. That hits hard for me, because like, that's how I started my stuff, where it was just free helping people. I was in sales full time, and just like, there was a shift, and I kind of have this on LinkedIn. So it's like, I don't even need to rattle the details, but I had people coming in that really were like, I just don't know how to take this familial, building real relationships approach online without sounding like a sleazeball. Yep. Right? They're like, I built it in Chamber of Commerce, in the BNI groups, in the PTA meetings, and at the games on the sidelines, just meeting people, being a really good human, an idea of going online. They're like, damn, how do I not lose that quality, right? Now
Yes.
am I now the slap chop guy? Like, look at my product. It's the best thing ever. And it's like, that's not what got me here today. But exactly, there was that gap, right? And from, you do enough, you figure out there's some common points. For me, that was several years. And finally, for me on the sales side, like just doing enough on that, I was like, the way people are buying things is changing. Like the B2B world started feeling more like car sales, where I'm like, they're coming in real well informed on the situation. They know the problem. They're aware of the category. They're aware of the solutions. They have an understanding of the implementation approach. If they don't necessarily know the individual nuances to the solution, oh, that's very different than 5 years ago when it was like, so tell me what you got, right? Yep. And I'm curious on your side, because you've worked with organizations on all sides of the spectrum, from probably low dollar value, really high units where they got to move thousands to make the business work. And on the other side, you have large companies that their average customer value might be $500,000, and you need 5 to 10 to build a very quality business. How have you seen things develop when it comes to, I was talking to Steph about this yesterday. I got a call from a deal we're working. It's like, hey, do you guys do lead gen? Whenever I hear somebody call me asking for lead gen, I'm like, so you need qualified meetings with interested in-market buyers tomorrow at no cost because you're busy, right?
And you just want us to do it for a profit, for like part of the rev share. Yeah.
100%. But for me, it was a psychology break of, they need to build a sustainable method that attracts in market and gets ahead of the need. And but they need the tomorrow solution of like, do you get meetings? But you've been in a business of generating leads for a long time and helping connect with buyers. You've talked a little bit about positioning. What are you seeing when it comes to working with clients? And you can take it whichever way, from the larger ticket value to the lower cost. Like, where are people going wrong when it comes to positioning themselves? Because positioning, if that's wrong, the rest of it almost doesn't matter. True. Right. So I'd love to understand your perspective, Nora, on where people potentially go wrong, how they can fix that on the positioning front to anchor everything else more effectively.
It's true. There's a couple of big shifts that I've seen, right? And this is across whether you're selling low ticket stuff or whether you're selling enterprise, high ticket kind of stuff. And that's the buyers. And you've kind of mentioned it too, that the buyers are more savvy, right? They're coming to you, they're more educated. And so if we're not in alignment with where our customer is starting from, and you're not starting the conversation at that point, you're losing them, right? You're losing them kind of off the bat. And so and it's funny, where there's a ton of people and ton of marketing gurus out there that'll give you the templates and the scripts and just use this. And Russell's got his perfect webinar and all that kind of stuff. And if you just use that stuff without putting it into context, without that alignment of where your buyer, your prospective buyer is starting from, you're not going to win. You're just not going to win. And so part of too, and I think where I see business owners go wrong, and you mentioned this too, is like, when they do a lot of great things and they know how to build relationships. If I put an ideal customer in front of them today, they could have a conversation with them, right? If I made them meet up at the local coffee shop, they wouldn't have a problem. They wouldn't hesitate. They would know what to say. They'd know how to do this conversational dance, right? And then you kind of say anything around digital marketing or internet marketing, and they freeze. And you're like, oh, I don't know how to talk to my customers. And I'm like, that's not true. Yes, you do. What the issue is, now you're seeing this as a weird black box, and you're losing sight of the individual. You're losing sight. This is no different than if you're having a conversation with that person in a coffee shop. You still have to address the same beliefs. You may have to shift their beliefs. You may have to build certain beliefs that they need to have. You still have to lead with empathy in any conversation. If they don't know you, you're leading with empathy. You have to demonstrate your authority and your ability to help them achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. Like, nothing is different. It's just the mechanism of how we deliver this communication. So whether it's email or webinar or, video series launch or all the things, or podcasts, what we're losing sight of a lot of times is just the conversation and the conversation components that need to be included no matter what vehicle you're using to deliver the information.
Yeah, it's hit it head on. It's tough. It's also when you're not when the founder is the one that's driving the narrative. And then, we'll have conversations around, great, let's say you have 20 meetings a month now.
Yeah.
What happens now? And they don't have a method for communicating to another person in the company for them to then facilitate that same process. And so one of the things we started thinking a lot more about is Have you read the, I think, what's it called? The Pumpkin Plan? I think that's what the book's called.
Oh, not yet, but I will.
I
I'll
like
put it on my list.
It's I've referenced this a few times, not necessarily on the podcast, but for me, it helped a lot. Like I didn't, I learned a lot through podcasting and just talking to people and asking questions. But for this, it talked through, building a great business is about understanding where your client is and what they uniquely need and can value. And then trying to find them in a fit with what your business uniquely offers, to find that way you're not providing, as you probably experienced in the agency world, which we definitely learned from, is you sometimes have a significant number of customized components where it's hard to scale because you're doing a little bit of different things for everybody. But it talks a lot about, and it goes down a little bit of a different path, but it talks a lot about that the entrepreneur's job is not to build something that they are involved in that also makes money. It's to connect people, processes, and systems in a sustainable way where they create a predictable outcome without your intervention.
That's right.
And I think in a marketing sense, it's very similar where, once we started being able to track everything and technology was integrated into every component of it, there was the benefit of efficiencies and scalability and the downside of we track things that just don't matter half the time.
Yes.
We're just tracking shit because there's a number that spits out in a report. And it's like, it's still a human to human engagement. They may be a CFO at a Fortune 500 company. They're a human.
That's right.
Talk to me a little bit about the role audio is playing from your perspective in the current marketing landscape. It's obviously important. You can give a little background on the business as well, which I think would anchor the point in understanding kind of your approach to that space. Yep. But I'm a big fan of podcasting. I'm a big fan of sustainable content models where this session can then fuel efficiency, not just a conversation. But audio itself is one where I think there's a disconnect. I don't think people necessarily know how to leverage it, especially the technical founders that, again, they're almost in their own way because communication may not be their sweet spot core competency. Nora, walk us through a little bit of how you're seeing audio play out in the market today for a tool for marketing.
Absolutely. So there's no denying the trend of audio, right? Between the crazy growth that Clubhouse had, you start to see, Spotify has their premium podcast now.
Wild.
I mean, it's crazy, right? And so, and you're seeing a lot more acquisitions in the space too. So it's here to stay. So this is kind of like the get on the bus or get on the train because it's left the station and you might as well get on board. And there's a reason for that, right? So a couple big ones that I would point out from kind of a founder or a B2B standpoint is that audio is about reach, but it's also about relevancy. So let's start with the reach part first, right? So audio lets you reach your audience when they're not sitting here at this box, right? At the screen. And so right now, everyone's like, oh, everyone's competing for attention. People are consuming more information than they ever have before. You're getting more attention than ever before. It's just not always while they're sitting at the screen, right? And then you throw the pandemic into it where we had Zoom fatigue, which is a very real thing. And people want the ability to consume information while they're on the go. If you look at stats, so if you just look at the numbers, the amount of hours that people are consuming podcast content actually rivals the amount of hours that people are watching Netflix each and every week, right? So why are we not meeting them where they're at? Why are we not allowing? Here's the thing, like we all know content is critical for people, especially what we just talked about, the savvy buyers. They are researching you. They want to know more about you. They're doing their due diligence before they make an investment in you. But if you don't have the content accessible for them, that makes it difficult for them to buy. So why are we not leveraging the power of and the convenience of audio to help reach them while they're walking their dog, while they're driving their kid to soccer, right? All of those types of things. So reach, I think, is incredibly important. And what we're doing at Hello Audio is we focus more on private podcasts. So we talk a lot about public podcasts and everyone kind of knows what a public podcast is. Obviously, you've got an amazing one here. Private podcasts operate just like a public one does. You can listen to it in your favorite, player of choice, but really the key is it can be gated. Right. So you can actually take this private podcast and your access link is tied to a specific email address. So that means when I send you access, that RSS feed is tied to Jeremy at, blah, 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 like your email address. Right. So that allows me now to have a lot more visibility and a lot more flexibility to customize the content I put in that feed, because it's more relevant to you. That's the cool part about private podcasts. Of the way we're doing it at Hello Audio is the conventional public podcast is same content. Everyone gets it at the same time. you push it out, and that's it. With private podcasts, you have a lot more flexibility into when you deliver, how you're delivering it, and the specific content. So we allow tagging. So think about it as like an audio CRM. So you're a prospective buyer, you have that tag. I'm going to shoot you an episode that you get as maybe, more of like addressing common objections, or maybe I'm going to shoot you a case study that's relevant to you and your profession, where I have, Bob or John, they went and they subscribed to the same feed, but I'm giving them different, like kind of segmented different episodes or different pieces of content that are more relevant to them. And not only am I able to now reach you because audio is super convenient and it's in your pocket, now we're actually able to make that conversation a lot more relevant, which is, I think that's the game changer. Not to mention audio is intimate, right? So if I'm hearing your voice in my ears, we're going to develop a relationship. We're going to develop that trust versus if I just read your ebook, or which I'm probably, let's face it, how many people are reading PDFs right now? Not many, but it's just audio is a game changer in terms of the strength of that connection.
100%. That's really, really cool. And something I'll be the first to admit, like it's not something I'm super familiar with. And so part of where it was interesting in the call, I think, you touched on a couple things with that, aligning to the buyer's journey and ensuring it's relevant. And I think it's using the podcast as more of because you're right? Like how many people are, let's be honest, sitting down to read a 9-page white paper?
Nope.
I think there's a gross assumption in the amount people care about the things not you, but like the business. People don't give a shit. Right. And like, they don't care. Like,
if like you make it hard, they care less. They
care so less. And like, I just, sometimes I think that's the hardest part to explain from a market and commerce perspective is you have to make it matter, but it's also the element of time creates more converts than reason, right? You have to be visible and valuable and relevant enough consistently and optimize that process so that you accelerate the conversion. But at the end of the day, like, if you're asking somebody to spend 100, we have, again, all B2B, it's like, if they're spending $1 million in cybersecurity contracts, like you're not going to force the hand into a deal. No. They have to be enabled into a buying decision where the majority of the people at that executive table have the information they need to justify a case for change, allocate budget, and commit to a 90-day or a 12-month implementation.
That's right.
You're not going to manipulate somebody into doing that because you have a sick landing page, right?
Yeah, or the stack. Yeah, the value stack. Right. That just doesn't going to work.
It doesn't work, and so I think it's really, really interesting. So what organizations, what types of clients are you finding are kind of reaping the most value out of it? Because I see this as type of an example, kind of where I heard it almost felt very like email, but deeper. That's kind of how it felt. It felt very like I have my email segmentations of like my CFOs or my these buyers, this demo. You're really going deep in persona segmentation, but it's almost like way more content value, content rich is like. Is that kind of the mentality of it? I'm sure you have a little bit of a vision for the product roadmap. Like, how do you see it evolving and, really like who's it for?
Well, I think when it initially started, it was more for creators, right? Because that was the easiest use case. It was, the course creators, everyone who's creating content and is having a hard time getting it consumed, period, right? That's really what it started as. So we had folks that were creating podcasted versions of their courses. So Amy Porterfield is one of our members, and she uses Hello Audio. She has essentially a private podcast of her paid course. So that makes it easy for all of her students. Some of them are busy moms and all the things, right? So they can't always attend the calls live. She puts those coaching call replays in a private podcast that now they're actually consuming it. What does that equal? That means success, and success sells, period, right? The more customer success you can demonstrate, the more likely you're going to have a sustainable business. So there's that. Then, you go into emails are a great example. We have copywriters who are amazing email writers, and they're still choosing to speak their emails and put them into a private podcast because really, do you really want to read that email, even though it's amazing?
0% of the time 0%. People want to read your emails. There is a zero, like I've seen, there's like I think it was something Loom put out as an ad. I love Loom. I'm a big fan. It sounds like there's some value, but it's like, should it be an email? No. Should it be a Slack message? Should it be like, there's almost like, we have so few meetings in our team for that exact reason. There's like a meeting to kick off the thing. There's the meeting to discuss the progress, the meeting to like know if it happened. It's like, when do you want me to just do my job?
Yeah.
Right.
How are we? It's funny. I did consult with an agency, and we did a time track to see how many meetings they were doing. 30 to 40 hours of meetings a week. I'm like, when are things getting done?
You're basically, your salaries are basically now babysitting commissions.
Yeah,
You know, it's
that's
like,
it.
so here's and as we kind of close things out, one of the things I think is really interesting, that just came to mind. I'm curious your thoughts, Nora. Is one thing we talk a lot about is and this came from a podcast I did on a different show. It was probably a year or two ago, but it was the guest talked a lot about investing in the space between people. And one of the things we talk a lot about is internally, we lose a lot because we're a distributed team, 100% virtual. We will stay that way. I don't care where people wake up and work, just be a great person, be a good person, do great work and enjoy life, right?
Yep.
The rest of it's semantics. However, what happens with that is the communication dynamic becomes much more thin because you don't get body language. You might not get tonality and pacing. You don't get a lot of that, which you get from audio and video. So, you know, whether it's Loom or using audio messages, like I'm a big advocate of, if there's uncertainty or concern, use an alternative form of communication than just writing it out. Right.
Yes.
I'm curious if you see the audio side of things. You know, obviously it's a value add from the customer facing journey, but I'm really curious to see if there's value from an internal standpoint where, how do you build culture where you don't know the people you work with because you only have a Slack channel, a Teams channel, and an email comms, and then some Zoom calls that you don't even have time to get to know each other because you're talking about all this shit you have to get done. You know?
And typically you're on a Zoom call, you're doing other things anyway. So
totally, you know, 100%. Like, so I'm curious the role you see it playing as we just continue to go deeper into this digital distributed work from anywhere lifestyle, the role audio can play just at large, not just bring in customers, but really using communication as a culture, which it sounds like is kind of where you're going. That's right. Is make that a competitive advantage.
It's so true. We've had a lot more companies start to use private podcasts for internal communication. So they have their private internal podcast. So for example, no one wants another all hands Zoom call, right? We really just don't. But what we do love is like no one really wants it. I'm sorry if you're scheduling them now as we're talking, no one really wants them. But what they do want though, is an update from the CEO. They want to know how things are going. You know what they do want? They want to hear customer feedback in the customer's own words. They want to hear what they're doing and how that's making an impact in the lives of your customers. So like at Hello Audio, we put together a customer success podcast where it's a private podcast and we just have story after story after story of all the folks that are having success with our product. And not only do our customers love that, sure, because now they get ideas, but our internal staff loves it too, because they know that what we're doing is making a difference. So yes, for the internal or like podcasting at work, yes, that makes a huge difference. The other use case we're seeing it on the internal operations side is onboarding. I will tell you, if you think about the normal process you're using today to onboard, or even if you've been onboarded as an employee, usually it sucks. Right. Yeah. You're how many weeks you have to wait for your email to get it set up in Slack, and then you don't know who to. What if you were able to get a private podcast instantly when you got your offer that had a welcome message from your direct manager, had a welcome message from the CEO that talked about your company values and what's important? Now with that audio, and it's simple. It takes minutes, right, to set that something up, but it's a game changer when it comes to building your company culture, especially in distributed organizations, which how many people are not.
I love that. That's so I'm cheesing, I'm grinning cheek to cheek over here because at the end of the year, I read Systemology, which I don't know if you're familiar with. I like it. It helped organize just my mindset of like, what are the systems that really run this business? How do we standardize it? So we're doing 2 systems a month. We'll work it through the year, and we're actively on onboarding new clients, onboarding new members of the team. And that was exactly the line of thinking of how do we leverage communications as a way to go deeper, right? Well, you know, a kickoff thing, like let's just be immersive. And now we went on, whether it's video or audio. I love that idea of even going as deep as, you know, hey, a welcome to week 2. Here's what we hope you're thinking and feeling. If you're feeling a little bit of anxiety around this, that's okay. You know, you almost use it as that way to just, again, go a mile deep, not a mile wide. But I love that because there was a study that came out. I'm trying to remember who facilitated the study. I want to say it was like ADP in partnership with Harvard's Research Institute or something like that. But they did an employment study, I think it was 2 years ago. And basically what they looked at was what do different generations value in their work experience? And there's the typical, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, or if you're listening or watching it and this is familiar, it looked at like acquisition and onboarding, social responsibility, flexibility, compensation. And the data more or less showed that, baby boomers look at compensation and benefits at about 50%, 50 to, I think it was 56% of their total score of like, this is what is important to me at work. And then it slides down from there. Millennials, that same comp and benefit category was basically 44%, and the displacement was heavily on, I think it was 8% of the acquisition, onboarding, interview, how they're entered into the company. It was 8% of their score was how effective their acquisition process was. And I, to be honest, I think I don't have any data to substantiate this, but I think clients feel the same way. If it's a janky onboarding and, they're like, I don't know what's happening, it's all email based, the same thing with an employee. I really think that the way you integrate people into your world or offload them, right? It says a lot. It feels very like you can't hide it when everybody's in their own world, right? If I'm in DC, I'm sitting in my room, it's like, you can't fake if you feel frustrated. There's no distractions at the water cooler, I really think that's a very interesting idea that I think, back to what we were talking about before, it's positioning, but I think that people are lacking a framework.
Yes. And they don't want to read an employee handbook. I'm sorry, they don't. I'm glad we all have them. Fantastic. No one's reading it. No one.
Nobody cares. No, 100%. It's that's really interesting. I actually really like the idea of a virtual, because to be honest, it's one of those things from a value to complexity. It's actually like, I just see significant ROI on that. It's just like, it's only positive, especially if you are a large organization or small, be able to hear it from the executive team, instead of HR sending a 700-word email, have it be a 90-second podcast or whatever it may be. It takes
and then it's an open channel of communication, right? I mean, you can drop new episodes in there. That's the cool part. And then it's just, then they get notifications and they can listen to it on their commute or when they're taking a break. It's just opening a new channel of communication that's convenient. Why wouldn't we do that?
100%. And that's what comes down to understanding the value of found time, right? The driving in the car time, the walking to the gym, the on the treadmill, we may be working, but people are itching for consumption in different ways. And so I think it's, and I want to close things out, but that kind of takes me to the last thing I wanted to ask you about, Nora, was learning about your customer from your customer, right? I think that there's a line between, they don't know what they want until you present it to them. I do believe in some elements of that, right? If we, somebody, I don't remember who said it, but it was like, if you ask somebody, it's, pre Henry Ford, what do you want? They'd say a faster horse. So at some point you have to break the mold and introduce something new that changes the game. But as somebody who's been involved from the technology side, the marketing side, connecting buyers and sellers, what does the role of learning from your customer play in building that funnel, building that go-to-market, building positioning? Is it all in-house where you just at the executive level lock arms and say, all right, what do we need to do? Or is there some customer engagement that fuels that process?
Okay, there's always there should be, in my opinion, there should always be customer engagement. I don't care if you're brand new and you don't have customers, go offer it to someone for free, get a beta group, get a focus group that you can test and get their feedback. And here's the thing, to your point, like with Hello Audio and private podcasts, no one, I will guarantee you, anyone who's sitting there in corporate and saying, I wish we had a better onboarding experience, they're not sitting there thinking, I wish I had a private podcast.
0% chance.
0% chance of that ever happening. Or a course creator who's, if you're an educator and people are not consuming your content, you're not even thinking about using a private podcast. You're just like, how do I get people to log in and watch these videos, right? It's just not a thing. So to your point, we have to start articulating that in a way that allows them to have the epiphany. But with that in mind, right, we can't have the epiphany for them. I can't have the epiphany, but if I can demonstrate how it can solve the need, the underlying desire, the underlying thing that you want more than anything else, if I can show you how what I have as a solution will fix that in a way that's easy for you, right? All the things that you also want, doesn't cost you a bunch of money, that it feels fair to you, that's where we're going to get the magic. But until you really uncover that desire and you're able to articulate it in the words and in the copy that your customer would use, you're going to be ignored. Your messaging is going to be ignored. They're not going to pay attention to you. Because just like if you're leading, like, oh, you need a private podcast. Who the hell knows what that is, right? No one necessarily wants that. But as soon as you start speaking to the true underlying desire of what they want and present your solution as an option and back it up, right? Back it up with authority and expertise, that's what's going to help get you more sales and really close those conversions. It's not about strong arming someone. It's not about the race to the bottom. Oh, try it. It's a penny, like that kind of, no,
Enablement.
It's enablement, and it's really about facilitating success and inviting your customer to be part of their own success, right? That's the key.
Yeah, no, it's massive. It makes perfect sense. And look, things are going to continue to evolve, right? And I think that's part of where these conversations can have value, because this time next year, things may be a very different landscape, right? I think I saw a stat that said 22% of all global users, or all people globally that have access to the internet, 22% of them have a TikTok account.
Wow.
Which even if let's assume that there's 5 to 8% on either side of that, let's just, always kind of pull down. Maybe it's only, 16%. It's still a ton of people changing the way they consume content. And I think whether it's internal, it's cultural, like the communication landscape is shifting. And I think, the role of technology needs to be enablement, but on top of that needs to be great strategy, great customer insights, and ability to let programs breathe. You're not going to start a private podcast and 6 weeks later or 2 weeks later, the world's different. It takes time to build these things. But Nora, help close us out here. Anything top of mind for you that you want to share, or where can people find you? This has been a lot of fun. I don't know if you put out content in other channels, but help close things out for us.
Yeah, so you can connect with me at norasaidit.com. And if you are interested in Hello Audio, you can try it out for free for 7 days. No credit card required. We're not doing any of that stuff. We truly believe in our ability to just get you to try it. And that's at helloaudio.fm.
Beautiful. I love it. Nora, thanks for joining. Everybody, thank you guys for tuning in to the Marketing Water Cooler podcast. You guys know the deal. 3 episodes every week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we look forward to coming back with more. So thank you all. Stay tuned for more. Nora, we'll see you.